I wrote the book about 2 years ago because I knew I was coming up for a transition around work. And I thought, well, I could feel, after being at Alternatives for 10 years, I could feel this big change coming. And I thought, well, why don't I write a book almost to lay the path out for me to travel? And as I was writing it, I realised that a lot of it was going outside my comfort zone, but that was perfect because the whole transition that I've gone through recently is outside my comfort zone. So I started off life in an averagely neurotic British family, emotionally repressed in many ways, just like many British families are. I married young. I went into the City of London in international banking for 10 years. I lost myself in the world of money, and actually the first 2 years I was helping to sell arms, not personally like going out and selling arms, but selling arms to Iran, Shah of Iran. There was a lot of, I realised the banking industry and the arms industry is so interlinked. I spent 10 years there. I basically hated it. I was a square peg in a round hole, or round peg in a square hole probably. And I was kind of hitting the wall of burnout, and I went to my ex-wife and said, now ex-wife, and said, I hate this job, I want to leave. She said, you've got responsibilities and children, stay with it. And I was like, okay, so another year or so, and then I hit the wall. I just kind of, depression, burnout, I was out of there, convalescent for a year. My career in banking was over, thank God, and I went to local government, Lambeth. If you know anything about Lambeth, it's at the time extreme left-wing local government, Red Ted at the time, anti-poll tax rioting and all that kind of thing. So I went from a very conservative environment to a very left-wing environment, very chaotic. My boss was a Stalinist. He believed Stalin was right. He was also a Gary Glitter fan, which was very weird for me. I spent 10 years there, and during that time it was more liberating for me. I was very good with people, and I learned I could manage and problem solve. But basically, and I started doing all the spiritual stuff, you know, the Watkins, the kind of all the stuff you see around. I started doing lots of meditation and shamanism and all kinds of things. And I realised that my other life outside my work was not meeting my kind of spiritual values really. So even though I was working in local government, it was a good job, I was earning a reasonable amount of money, it was stress-free, considerably stress-free. I decided to do something very spiritual. I asked the universe, should I resign? You know, very specific question, should I resign? And within 48 hours I got the answer back. I was walking down Acre Lane in Brixton, and a guy with a t-shirt, on the back was a slogan, just do it, you know, Nike. And I was going, you must be kidding. Yeah, I'm not listening to that. And then within a minute I saw the same sign in the window. I resigned on the spot. Then I was in this kind of whole transition where I ended up at Alternatives, which is a kind of mind, body, spirit organisation promoting authors. You know, a lot of the authors, I think Alternatives had Wayne Dyer many years ago, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, Neil Donald Walsh, all these kind of people. So I was the director there for 12 years. I loved it. It was great. My life was great. But after about 9 years, I started falling out of love with the organisation. Not the field, but I just didn't want to promote events anymore. I was getting bored, and so then I reinvented my work. I delegated, which is what you do when you get bored, right? You delegate and reinvent. But that didn't work, so I realised I've just got to resign. I resigned. I had nothing to go to particularly other than, you know, empty space. Come last November, you know, I was resigning, and that's it. You know, there's nothing there. I stepped through into New Year, and suddenly a whole load of opportunities. 2 consultancy jobs came my way just through chance, you know, meetings with people. I've started book mentoring, and I did a workshop recently, and 7 people signed up for this kind of book mentoring program. I'm like, oh, it's happening. You know, something else is happening. So basically, the book is about going from suffering to flow and synchronicity and something else more interesting happening. It's written from my own personal experience. In the city I suffered really big time. I had depression for many years. I burnt out, hit the wall. Local government, again, I felt, I guess we'll find out in the Q&A, that most work is confining for our talents, abilities, you can say soul qualities if you like. So for me, work has been a progression of expansion, into freedom. How do I connect my core values, what's important for me, and my spiritual essence and my authentic self into work? So that's what the book is about. And my basic premise is that the further we go in time, you know, we've passed the industrial age, we're well into the virtual information age, and there's more happening as we go along. Things like creativity and play and innovation are much more important than hard work and slog. Have you discovered that? You know, some of you, I still slog, even in the virtual age. Issues like time is very important. I'm finding, you know, even if you're doing things you absolutely love, how do you manage your time, which is a big challenge for me now, because the more things I say yes to, of course, there's challenges around time. How do we engage our intuition in the whole process of work? How do we engage things like resourcefulness, you know, inner resources? What I mean by that is talents and abilities that we don't know we've got until we start accessing them and using them. You know, I didn't know I could write a book till I started writing a book. I didn't know I could talk until I, you know, publicly until I started. I didn't know I could coach until I started. All these things were just ideas. Can I do that? And you know, and in the process, there's a lot of experimentation, because some things I tried, I'm just not good at. You know, I tried a lot of creative things, from jewellery making to stained glass. I thought I can do, because creativity is an important value. But I explored a lot until I found, writing. Okay, that's what I can do. And then I had the idea, what about running writing workshops? That's an idea. And then suddenly I've been running them for about 5 months. I have an average of about 70 to 80 people turning up each time. Because when you're in the flow, things happen. Have you discovered that? You know, that if you're just kind of knocking on doors trying what's happening, one will open and you go, oh, that's the one, and you step through it and there's a whole new landscape on the other side. What else do I need to tell you about this? I think that gives you an idea. I think I'd like to get in Q&A. Somebody's got some interesting questions, many practical exercises, and some of them are group exercises. Well, a lot of the exercises you can do by yourself. Just trying to think, are there a lot of group exercises? I think the majority are ones you can do by yourself. Every chapter has exercises. There are also meditations on things. There's a chapter, for example, on be yourself, which is a very important chapter. The essence of work should be yourself, but actually most work suggests that we should not be ourselves, we should conform with a system. And so there are things here about running on autopilot, how to switch off autopilot, and there are meditations on mindfulness of breath and loving kindness, which actually starts switching off the kind of, when a system says you must be a certain way, the idea is no, I'm going to be what I'm going to be and see what happens. And some companies go, you don't fit. And that's part of the journey, really, you know, if you don't fit in a company. But there are a lot of exercises from that to how you slow down time, how do you deal with issues of busyness and multitasking, and how do you awaken, or let me see, changing unresourceful states. That's all part for me of work, actually, because there are so many elements of work. So I wanted to make it highly practical as well as a kind of spiritually self-help kind of book, spiritual self-help kind of book. How's that? Is that
great?
Yeah? Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Well, life path and work kind of do intermingle. I mean, life path can intermingle relationships and anything else like that, but work is such a fundamental part of life purpose, I think. So how to discover it? It's like that big question, is that how do you discover your life purpose? For me, there are a number of elements. One of them is, what do you dream about? What do you love doing? You know, and for me, so one of the things I loved doing was mind, body, spirit world and creativity. There were two powerful things that I really liked. And when I first started getting interested in spirituality, all my bookshelves were kind of moved, you know, all the old philosophy and history books were gone, and all my bookshelves were filled with spirituality. But at a certain point I thought, that's not going to get me work, you know. But actually, by synchronicity, I started working in alternatives, a mind, body, spirit organisation. So there is work even in things like spirituality. I found a great, you know, it was a great career for a while. Now I'm really passionate about creativity, so I'm doing book writing and running creativity workshops. So values, what you love, is that conversation, right? You know, and if you don't know what you value, there are exercises in the book that give you a load of values, and it's just about how do you sit down and go, what are the top 5 out of all that stuff? It could be like creativity, it could be, what could it be? You could even value family, it could be anything. and from that prioritise them, and then you start to see what do you really value. Most of us don't ask ourselves what we value in life. It's a very important question, actually. I didn't understand about values until I was in my mid-30s, and I realised, well, what are values? What do I value? And values change with age as well. The other one is, what's our main challenge in life? So what we keep hitting up against as a challenge could be something that turns into a work for us. Some people are challenged in relationships and then find that their greatest passion is to go into the area of relationships, like become a relationship coach or something like that. So challenges, what you're most challenged by, what your family say no to, you shouldn't follow that path, is a good indication about what you might be good at or what your soul's calling you to. So for example, I think Handel, you know the composer Handel, his father, was it Handel? I think it was Handel. His father wanted him to be a lawyer and refused to let him play music, and so he had to do it in secret. So for him the challenge was, you can't do that, was a sign actually pointing him towards, this is something you should do. Any of you motivated by somebody saying you shouldn't do that, and you go, I'm going to show you now, I'm going to do that. All the major projects I've done in my life, somebody said to me, no, you shouldn't do that, and then I've gone, I'm going to do it, because I realise it's important for me to do it, you know. The third one is intuition. You know, using your intuition. And intuition is connected to how connected we are to our body, how connected we are to our emotions, how connected we are to our breath, things like this. The more left brain in our heads we are, the less intuitive we'll be, the more we run away into computer games or couch potato TV, the less we'll be connected to our intuition. Intuition's a subtle language, right? Do you know what I mean by intuition? You know, that is the... Intuition comes at many levels. The body says something. Should I go and meet this friend? I don't feel it. That's one level of intuition. Emotions, we get emotional feedback. We get our mind telling us, you know, conversations in the mind, and we get something deeper telling us. There's different levels of intuition. If we start listening to this inner conversation, the whole book really is about listening to an inner conversation that's important to you. Most of us listen to a surface conversation, you know? How can I get more money? How can I impress my friends? How can I get more girlfriends? Whatever, you know. Whatever the conversation is. But the deeper one is, what's really meaningful, important? What do I want to do? What's calling me? What's calling me? You know, the idea of calling, which Joseph Campbell talks about a lot in The Hero's Journey. Calling. We're called, and we, you know, that thing of calling and accepting or refusing. So in terms of work, work is a hero's journey. We can accept or refuse. So there's dreams, there's challenges, there's intuition, and the other one is life experience. What experience and skills have you so far developed? That's also a clue to where you're going. So I worked in banking, hated it with a passion, but when I ended up at Alternatives, I was managing all their finances, and actually quite enjoyed it. I quite liked cash flow and money. I realised I enjoyed that bit, I just didn't like that rigid make money for shareholders thing. Does that make sense? So there's those four, like a Venn diagram, it all points to the centre, you know. Dreams, challenges, intuition, life experience. I mean, there might be more areas that give you, but if you just sit down with those things, it's a good indication of life mission, I would say. And usually it's more obvious on the outside than the inside, because, you know, most of us go, I don't know. You know, you might hear that and go, I still don't know, but from the outside it becomes obvious very quickly. If you was to tell me your life, probably in half an hour I'll have a very quick idea about where your soul's pointing you, which is what the coaching is.
What if you've got a very good idea of your life purpose?
Yeah.
And you've got the knowledge. It's just communicating that knowledge and using it in a way that allows you to exist in the world. Proficiently.
Well, there's knowledge and ownership, and knowledge is many people read. You know, I could read all the books in this bookshop and still be very stuck. I know everything there is to know about all this stuff, but I'm not doing anything because I'm just acquiring more knowledge. I can go to more workshops and read more books. Books are fine if you choose the right book. But the thing is about ownership, which is about doing, and so you have to convert knowledge into doing. And so qualities which are being demanded in terms of work is courage, for example. Because when you step towards something you know is important, what happens is the threshold becomes guarded by pain, conditioning, beliefs, inner critic, external doubting committee. You shouldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? That kind of familiarity zone. When you inside the zone, we're comfortable. When we start to step towards starting a new business or getting married or having a baby or moving country or something outside our zone, we've never done it before. The guardians are those things: pain, critic, conditioning, beliefs that says don't do it, go back. When you step through that threshold, you have to break through that resistance, which is internal and external. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you break through that personally?
How do you break through internal resistance? Okay. Well, first of all, you have to be sure that what you're going towards is real. So let's say you have a dream of starting a new business in the music industry, perhaps, writing music and performing. So you have to test it a little bit. Is this real or is it fantasy? So real means I'm willing to take steps towards it. Fantasy is it's an escape from my life. I hate my life and I'm escaping from it. If it's real and powerful, you'll move towards it, and the pain and resistance gets stronger usually. Has anybody done anything really meaningful? Do you realise, like moving country, getting married, starting a new business, new career? Have you done that kind of stuff? And as you get closer to it, it's like, oh my God, am I doing the right thing? People say, are you sure? There's all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? All that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and we're never 100% sure, are we? But we have to be sure enough. If our intuition is saying yes, if we've done all that kind of work around, is our dream pointing that way? Is our challenges pointing that way? Is my intuition pointing that way? Is my life experience pointing that way? Then go for it.
Well, it's just like everything is pointing in one direction. It has been done for years. It's just, and from a very early age, it's just taking that from
Your head
and manifesting that in a meaningful way in my life, and then achieving that physically.
Well, I would say
but all the tools are there. Just
Yeah.
a matter of Yeah.
the simple question would be, which I won't ask you now, but the question would be, what's stopping you from stepping towards it? It will be the test of whether it's real or not. I've had a coaching client once who said to me, I want to be an astronaut. I said, really? Is that what you want to be? And tell me, have you taken flying lessons? No. Have you done anything to take a step towards it in your life ever? No. So is that real? No. But that person was actually passionate about justice. So actually, do you want to become a security guard or a policeman? Yes. He's actually applying for the police now. He doesn't want to be an astronaut. It was an escape from what was really true for him. But he's actually applying to get in the police, and he's really passionate to get in the police. He's my son actually, so I know him very well. He wanted to be an astronaut, and I'm going, really? But police he wants to do. My daughter was passionate about crime. I said, great, she did a criminology degree. She worked in the criminal justice system for a long time. She did it. And so she realised her rather strange passion. I hope she doesn't watch this, because I really encouraged her, but for me it was a kind of strange passion. Her thesis was on serial killers, which I found very strange, but I went with it, But, for me the test is my children have their own vision and dreams, and I had to encourage them to follow it, no matter what that dream was, as long as it's true for them. So it's that thing about, is it a true conversation or is it a superficial conversation? Superficial conversation is fantasy. A real one is something you will actualise at some point. However scary, my life really shifted when I made the decision to become a writer. Now, 1% of people probably make it in the writing world, I think. It's like acting, right? So it's not an easy decision to make. I'm going to become a writer. My life blew up at that point. Because there were a lot of things that had to fall away, including my relationship, my home, my career, my ex-career. So the price to pay for that vision is you have to let go of all these things, which are quite important, right? House, relationship, career. But that's the price sometimes you have to pay. Is it real or not? So for me, it was real.
But when you was at that point where all those things fell away, how did you go? How did you go from there? How did you
Well, I'd already had 10 years of writing experience, so I knew it wasn't like something completely new. I'd written 2 books. I'd worked in the industry of authors, so I knew that I had a bit of a head start in some ways. My passion put me in that zone of writing already, and I realised part of the passion of being at Alternatives was being around writers. I've always liked hanging out with writers, so that was the next step for me. It was obvious for me. Sometimes the next step is not obvious. You need a little bit of help.
Yeah.
Feedback is good. Otherwise, if it's an all internal process, it's just like you don't know. You need to go and see somebody, a coach. You need to go to a seminar where you can get feedback from somebody, and actually somebody will tell you if it's real or not. They can help you. Somebody you trust. Somebody you trust. Anybody else got a question? The main inspiration of writers in my own journey.
Yeah, and for the book itself.
And what, sorry?
For the book.
For the book.
Particular book.
For my own journey, people like Joseph Campbell. I really love Joseph Campbell. People like Matthew Fox, who was thrown out the Catholic Church for writing a book called Original Blessing, where the Catholic Church believes in original sin. He went against it. The Pope, current one, actually threw him out. I thought anybody gets thrown out of the Catholic Church must be good. He was very inspirational. Friends of mine like Nick Williams, who wrote the book The Work We're Born to Do, was a great inspiration for many years. Other people, David White, the poet, conversations about leadership and stepping through, he calls it the frontier, finding your own frontier, very inspirational. He became a corporate poet, again, what a career to choose, right? I'm going to become a corporate poet. I met him once. Very edgy, I found, but very inspirational. Who else? People like Paulo Coelho, I like his writing immensely. There are other fictional writers, actually, that are not in this genre, that I've been inspired by. Tolkien was always my childhood hero. His breadth of imagination was incredible. I think in the book I list a whole list of inspirational authors in the field, you know. What colour's my parachute, to Lawrence Bolt, the Zen book, he's written a book on work, got an American author, brilliant author. Yeah, so any author has to steal ideas, like Pablo Picasso said, I hope this is right to say, all artists are thieves, and I believe it. You know, I've seen many writers come to alternative, sitting in the back making notes, but of course they convert it into their own understanding. You don't have to have I don't think it has to be a blank page. I've been inspired by dozens of people, and that's just part of the process, I think. I think that's normal, actually. Thank you. Anyway, I think we've got time for one more, or?
Sure, one last question.
One more really interesting question. Who's got a really interesting question that they really want to ask about work? Could be very personal to themselves if you want to be. Anybody?
So maybe claiming it's going to be the last question always puts pressure and expectation. Right?
Okay.
Actually, you want to talk about expectations? And how to handle expectations and disappointment, maybe? I don't know.
Okay, expectations. Expectation is the other side of belief. What we believe about ourselves, we project into the future into expectation. So if we believe work is hard, I'll never amount to anything, corporations are evil, I can never fulfill my dreams or make money from my dreams, you know, on and on and on and on. That is the stuff that we project into our future, is what we expect. So if our beliefs are kind of, the bar is set very low, our expectations are set very low. Of course, there are also people who fool themselves and go, you know, set the bar ridiculously high, and they go, hi, I'm just going to be the next, you know, Madonna. It's wonderful, but actually it's not really congruent with their true beliefs. Because if true belief is, there's no way I'm going to make it, but you're just putting on a show, then eventually you're going to hit something. The book goes into processing belief and expectation, because they're very important to have realistic expectations and beliefs which are actually expansive and possible and flexible. You know, beliefs are only things we've made up. They're only stories about us that we've got from our parents and grandparents. And actually there's another whole process around undoing that stuff, because my father said to me, get a proper job. I did that for 20 years. I hated it. I had to actually undo the proper job. I didn't even know what a proper job was. Undo it. So working at alternatives is not a proper job. Being a coach is not a proper job, according to my father. Doing this is not a proper job. Definitely writing workshops is not a proper job. So, but I'm actually happier than I've ever been. So I had to undo the definitions of the past, which opened up my expectations for the future. How's that?
Yeah, great.
Is that a good answer?
Yeah, great note to end on. So, absolutely. You got it.